Alright guys, TacticalRab again today. Hope you're doing well and enjoying your day so far. Crimsix is back at it again, revealing his full opinion on so many of the events over the last several years. The biggest hot take though, the biggest surprise, his thoughts on joining OpTic as the biggest regret in his competing career. Not because of the dynasty, not because of how good of a time he had on that team, but mainly because of what it means for him today, with the Green Wall deserting him ever since he left the organisation. Is this a fair point? Can this possibly be true? Very much intrigued to your perspective in the comments below. Hit the like button if you enjoy. Subscribe if you're new as always, I greatly appreciate it. Now there's loads of updates today. Firstly, a couple of roster things. Rocket came out with this. I think it was some Morse code. People translated it to be like, see you in China or something. So there's nothing crazy about this, but still it probably implies that their roster is coming rather soon. We believe it's Accuracy, Lin's, Awakening, Vivid. That's the rumoured team of 4 that maybe they've now got locked in and ready to go. Very interesting team that we shall discuss in some detail as and when it's confirmed. The other team is Los Angeles Thieves to mention, because they say, I mean, this basically confirms they've got their team locked in. So yeah, we think it's going to be Ghosty, Cammy, Joe Deceives and Afro. But I thought honestly this deal was done quite some time ago, and I was expecting an announcement pretty much this time last week. So maybe it's going to happen today, but still this pretty much says they've got the team locked in. There was some thoughts with Thieves as to whether they might change their mind a bit, right? Whether they would say, oh, is Cammy the best option? Because some were saying that aBeZy could be a good target, and I think that he would have potentially been a good target to be fair, but he's now going to run a sub on Surge for some reason, apparently at least. That's the going rumour over there. And even when Nadeshot said a couple of months ago now, really, when Rostermania was starting, that more than likely they will be a place for rookies to build around, right? They'll bring some rookies in and help them grow, whereas the team they're supposedly forming will have no rookies in at all. So a little bit confused by the Thieves direction, but it's not like I don't like it. I actually think their team could be pretty good, but it's a bit of a question on that. Now, yesterday we talked about an 11-team league, and this is because the Guards, Cronky Sports and Entertainment, also owners of the Los Angeles Guerrillas, have effectively made it very clear their intentions to get the hell out of esports at all costs. Now, will they be forced to continue to run a skeleton crew on Los Angeles Guerrillas? Quite possibly, yes. And that organisation will likely still exist, but for not that much longer. The issue is, though, is that we have more organisations in a similar boat. You guys might remember that Wrecked Global merged with KOI, this Spanish organisation owned in part by aBeZy, right? Big Spanish streamers. They made this all KOI, and you know, they were a pretty big name for some time, but they've had some success in other esports, but again, esports isn't cheap, and they're bailing out a lot of money. Apparently aBeZy has had to pay close to 3 million euros out of pocket because the parent company Infinite Reality has been unable to pay salaries. Zero surprises there as far as I'm concerned. This whole Infinite Reality company thing sounded like a shambles from the start to finish, especially when they were valuing themselves at like $1 billion. I don't know what was happening there behind the scenes, but someone got conned basically. And now KOI are on the verge of kind of going broke, and yet they basically own now London Royal Ravens and Rogue and Wrecked Global and all this stuff. They basically did a partnership. It's KOI effectively took over London to some extent, and there was lots of talk. Okay, would they move the team to Madrid? What's going to go on? They're going to bring in some Spanish players, but of course Heretics have come in and kind of done that with Florida, so I doubt they'll do that with London, especially when they might be thinking, you know, I might just need to get out of here right now. So I don't know what the future is for KOI, but there was talking points yesterday, as Jake Hale says. Looks like the Ravens' financial situation goes right to the top. I mean, look, so many of these organizations have been so badly run over the last few years, and even with new ownership, it's just the same story. So yeah, they're having problems with payments, and I don't know what this means for the future, especially when, even as it says here, the team would have had problems with the payment of its LEC license with Riot Games. And as Ben says, there really is a non-zero chance. This season, we only have 10 teams in the CDL. So yesterday I talked about 11 teams. Now we're talking about 10 teams. And as Jake Hale says, from his perspective, this season it's absolutely fine. Well, it's obviously absolutely fine, but, you know, from a 12-team perspective, he does believe that we're going to have all 12 teams in the league this year. But for next year, that's when, you know, Ben Nassim even says this season, so who even knows at this point? But it's quite possible that, you know, Ravens and Guerrillas will, you know, be locked in and still exist for this current season, but for next season, it's maybe unlikely. And to be honest, I think for next season, I don't even know if the CDL is going to exist in 12 months, is kind of my current perception of this. Microsoft coming in, all the teams running out of money, I think, the model is going to have to change quite substantially. And, well, this is such example of exactly that. Now, let's talk about this Crimsix stuff, right? Because he comes out on the exclusive podcast with the Stocksman that was happening. I mean, he's done so many bangers lately. We had the Clayster one a few days ago. Now we got the Crimsix one. He talks, of course, about the Crimsix versus Clayster stuff on the Subliners. There's a lot of juice in here, but we're going to dive into the OpTic stuff, of course, because it's always the most juicy. He was talking about, him versus Scump in terms of greatest of all time situation, saying that, look, as far as he's concerned, he's the GOAT hands down. And Scump has even said that himself, right? Scump said, look, Crim has the accolades. Crim is the greatest player ever in terms of accomplishments, and he's number one. Is Scump the most impactful player ever? Yes, Crim says that in this interview that, yeah, sure, Scump gets the dub on that one. But I think what was really interesting for people here was Crim's perspective on, joining OpTic, the OpTic dynasty. He also said that one of his, maybe his third biggest regret in his career was not taking the dynasty as seriously because they were so good. And he was saying that they wouldn't really practice that hard. They would get on and play, and then they'd just play CS all night, try and do content and stuff and have a good time, and they'd still win the vast majority of events they played. But they didn't win everything. And Crim says that if he kind of could do it all over again on the OpTic dynasty, he would really make sure the boys were locked in. And he feels like as a player himself, he wasn't as locked in as he needed to be, and he reckons they could have won basically every single event in that period, and they didn't. And that is kind of the measure of the man that Crimsix is. And I think Crimsix is a difficult one to put your finger on. Even a lot of the very competitive players we have in the CDL and other, even other sports aren't quite as intense as Crimsix is. He's a difficult player to really understand what goes on behind, behind his eyes in some sense. Because just the way he thinks about things is different to the way many players or, really just any normal person thinks about things. So that's why you've got to look at what Crimsix says through a slightly different lens. It's just the type of guy he is, and it's obviously one of the reasons why he became as successful as he has. I think one of the frustrations for Crim as well is this, and I do feel, part of this I think is self-inflicted, part of it I do feel sorry for him for, is that, despite being the greatest ever in terms of accolades and accomplishments and going down in that way, and I think it's not a unanimous opinion in the community, but I think the majority of pros would say, yeah, Crim's the GOAT in that sense. Sure, in terms of impact, Scump's the best, and Crim says that himself, but most, fans, I think, and certainly most players would say Crim's the GOAT. But did he get the send-off from the league when he retired? No. Does he quite get the respect, maybe, that he feels like he's owed in the community to this day? Quite possibly not. Is he even particularly involved in the scene today? It doesn't always feel like it at times. So it's interesting because in other sports, the greatest ever is, held up in very high esteem. Whereas in, Call of Duty, Crim often is put down in many ways. And I'm sure that does frustrate him. And some of that comes from his perception on the way I guess he's been treated by the Green Wall over the years. So I wanted to share his perspective on regretting joining OpTic in the first place. But just before that, I wanted to share a clip where he talks about what his reaction when he heard Scump retired. And I think this kind of gives you some of them, not good or bad, but just the measure of the man that you're dealing with here. And, you've got to, when Crimsix says something, you've got to look at it in a different lens.
He retired. I'm not going to lie. I was happy when he did because I realized no one would ever pass me, right? Mm-hmm. And then I see I remember I was driving. I literally screamed, rolled down the window, screamed, yes. Just so happy. And I mean, I like Seth, but at the end of the day, that was a moment where I was like, yeah, you did it.
It's my throne.
Yeah. I've done what I sort of set out to do and be the greatest COD player ever.
What's your biggest regret competing?
It's probably joining OpTic.
What?
But not because of that dynasty.
Oh, okay.
Right? Not because of anything you would think of, right? So when you everyone's like, what the fuck are you talking about?
Yeah.
Right? I'm talking about right now doing sim racing. I don't, everyone sort of just left me, right? So before OpTic, I had 200K on YouTube. Mm-hmm. I was doing content before OpTic, right? People were fans of more than just Crimsix. They were fans of Ian Porter.
Yeah.
Right? And now I'm seeing that I lost all of that. It's gone.
Because
Dude, I put up
they love
incredible.
OpTic more than
I
you.
put up incredible. Oh, well, not just OpTic, my teams or my persona or maybe my game or not my persona. Well, alias.
Sure.
Crimsix.
Yeah.
All right.
But incredibly different from the fact.
But I mean, dude, I'm putting out fire ass vlogs. No one's watching them, and it's just sort of like eye opening to me because I'm like, hey, maybe I did something wrong. Maybe I fucked up. Maybe, pissed off too many people. Yeah. This and that.
That's the interesting top regret.
But I was at the end of the day before that, right?
Yeah.
I had people who liked me for me. Yeah. Rather than. And point is, like, yeah, I may have won a lot less, right? But I would have been in a better spot now.
So Crim quote tweets this: I'm obsessed, but I finally admitted it. It's not clickbait, maybe it is. Since I said those 5 letters, I imagine the 5 letters he means are OpTic, right? So look, back to reality. I'm actually being serious on this one. Doubt I caused any drama either. So Crim's point is that joining OpTic was obviously great for winning events. They won a lot, and yeah, he regrets that he couldn't win more on that OpTic team. And I'm sure he had a good time on the OpTic team and on OpTic as a brand. But looking back on his kind of career and where he is in the present day, he feels he'd be in a better position if he hadn't joined OpTic. And, maybe there's some truth to this, as crazy as it sounds, because as I said before, when Crim left OpTic, it wasn't amicable. Him and Scump had a bit of a breakup, really. He leaves, there was friction there. Obviously, the Green Wall are going to side with Scump on that, and even to this day, Crim gets, I think, somewhat disrespected in terms of what he's done in his career. He doesn't quite get the, the respect maybe he deserves from the community at times, although you could argue maybe he doesn't deserve that respect. It's obviously each to their own. But him leaving OpTic in the way that he did kind of put the Green Wall against Crim in some sense, and that means that it's had negative consequences for him on that side. It's also had negative consequences probably for his content, I suppose, as well. I mean, pre-OpTic, Crim's content was now on OpTic. That was when Crim's content did the best. I mean, if you go to his YouTube channel there, just kind of sort by oldest or whatever, you can go back and find some of these videos that he was making pre-OpTic, and so obviously YouTube was very different back then. The type of things that worked on YouTube were very different. You had these just funny short little videos and vlogs and stuff that would do well, but 2014 Champs vlog, 120k views, like his videos used to pop off back in the day. Xbox 360 human catapult, right, where he just launches it out the window, and then he joins OpTic, and then his stuff starts to pop off, I suppose, and he does admit after the fact that, well, even when he was on OpTic, the people watched his videos not necessarily so much for him, but for the OpTic guys, and then when he left OpTic, a lot of those guys, just disappeared from his channel, right, and he felt this on his stream, and he felt this on his content, that after the breakup they'd had with OpTic, a lot of the OpTic fans actively turned against Crim, didn't tune into his content, and especially on the YouTube stuff, and that kind of, that loses you momentum with the algorithm, and then all of a sudden your videos are doing like, no views at all, as he was discussing, and, so I think in terms of the present day, Crim might have a point that his legacy, let's say he never joined OpTic in the first place, he went to other teams instead or whatever, still had some success, but not the same success that he had. Okay, would he have the same legacy today? Probably not, to be honest. Would he be in a better position today, as in people maybe still liking him a bit more for who he is rather than, than who he used to be maybe on OpTic? I don't really know what you guys think about that. Maybe yes, I don't know. It's tough to say. But frankly, life moves on. What can you do about it? So very much intrigued to your thoughts and all that in the comment section below. Crim's always a difficult character to, digest, to really appreciate where he's coming from, what he's getting at. And I just think for a regular person, it's difficult to really understand Crim, but I think when you try and understand Crim, I think you can see where he's coming from a lot of the time. So I don't know, it's interesting. I know that people will be up in arms about this, as they always are when Crim says stuff, but I think he's speaking from the heart on this one, and I do feel bad in some sense for the way that he, the lack of respect that he does seem to get, despite what he's done for the scene and who he is in the scene, compared to similar characters in other sports. But maybe just time will heal some wounds, I suppose, in that sense. So intrigued to your thoughts in the comments. Hit the like button if you enjoyed, subscribe if you're new, take care, and I'll see you next time.